Hello everybody, welcome to this episode of your favorite instructors. A little disclaimer here, the content that you're about to view here is specific to the training standards and expectations of the examiners that we work with in northeastern Illinois. So please do not use this training material if you are attempting to pass any of your commercial vehicle testing in another location. All right, keeping that in mind, come on in, let's get to trucking, shall we? All right, so once you finish your hidden cab and brake checks, you're going to be exiting the vehicle and you're going to be asked by the examiner to go through a number of things. So we're going to start today off with talking about the front of the truck and the engine compartment and what things you need to point out there. Okay, so when we're looking at the front of the truck, we're going to be pointing out the headlight assemblies. Our headlight assemblies should be properly mounted, secured, not cracked or broken, no moisture behind the lens. The headlight assemblies contain the low beam headlights, the high beam headlights, and the 4 function lights. The 4 functions are running, parking, turning, and 4-way hazard lights. All of them should be functioning correctly. Next, we'll look up above the windshield where we have our identification and clearance lights. So with the 3 lights in the middle, those are our identification lights indicating that the vehicle is a minimum width of 8 feet. And the ones on the outside are our clearance lights indicating a vehicle height of 13 feet 6 inches. Those should be amber in color. They should be properly mounted and secured, not cracked or broken, clean and clear, and of course working properly. All right, so next I'm going to be checking my engine compartment. I'm going to unlatch the hood. I'm going to check my fluid levels. I would check my oil by pulling the dipstick out, wiping it clean, reinserting it, pulling it out again, looking for the oil mark to be above the add line and at or below the fill line. I'd also check my coolant reservoir to make sure that my coolant was filled to the proper level in between minimum and maximum. The reservoir itself should be properly mounted and secured, not cracked, broken, or leaking any coolant. All caps should be present and tight, not cracked, broken, or leaking any coolant, as well as all hoses affiliated with the coolant reservoir should be soft and pliable and not leaking any coolant. I'd also check my power steering fluid. I'd want to make sure that it was filled to the proper level between minimum and maximum, and that all hoses associated with it are soft and pliable and not leaking any power steering fluid as well. Back here I have my air compressor. My air compressor should be properly mounted and secured, not leaking any air, oil, or water, and working properly. Going on to my other steering components. My steering shaft should be properly mounted and secured. Should have U-joints at both ends. The U-joints should be well greased and not cracked or broken with no illegal welds. My steering gearbox should be properly mounted and secured. Should not be leaking any power steering fluid and working properly. My 3-piece steering linkage, the pitman arm, the drag link, upper lower steer arms, and the tie rod should all be properly mounted and secured, not cracked, broken, no illegal welds. All components should be well greased, and they should all be secured with castle nuts and cotter pins. Okay, for my steering axle components, I'm going to start with my suspension system. I'm going to talk about the front spring hanger. Should be properly mounted and secured, no cracks, no illegal welds. The main leaf spring should be properly secured and mounted, not cracked or broken. The rear spring hanger should be properly mounted and secured, not cracked or broken, no illegal welds. And there should also be a rear spring hanger shackle, rear spring shackle, that's properly mounted and secured, not broken, no illegal welds. We're also going to look at the U-bolts. We want to make sure that those are properly mounted and secured over the saddle and around the leaf springs with no signs of being loose, in which case there would be shiny metal. Next, we'll check our hydraulic shock absorber. We want to make sure it's properly mounted and secured, not leaking any hydraulic fluid, and it is mounted or secured at the top and bottom with nuts, bolts, and rubber bushings. The rubber bushings should be soft and pliable. Moving on to our brakes. Our brake chamber, properly mounted and secured, not leaking any air, no cracks, not broken, no illegal welds. All hoses associated with the brake chamber should also be soft and pliable, not dry rotted or cracked or leaking air. Our push rod and slack adjuster should be properly secured and mounted. The slack adjuster should be well greased. The push rod should not be bent. And if checking them by hand with the tires chalked and the brakes released, there should be no more than 1 inch of free play when pulling on the slack adjuster. We'll be checking our brake drums. The brake drums should be properly mounted and secured, not cracked, broken, no illegal welds, no grease or oil present on them, or the brake shoes and brake lining. The brake shoes and brake lining should also be properly secured and mounted with no cracks, no illegal welds, and no oil or grease. Any presence of those brake contaminants would be a sign of an inner axle wheel seal leak. Okay, finally, our steer tire. Our steer tire should be in good condition, should be the same size and type across the axle, should be evenly worn with a minimum of 4/32 tread depth in all major grooves. It must be a virgin tire, it cannot be a recap tire. Should be inflated 90 to 110 psi or manufacturer specifications. There should be no abrasions, bulges, or cuts, no exposed material on the sidewalls, and it should not be leaking any air. Our rim, properly mounted and secured, and it should not have any cracks or illegal welds. It's held in place by 10 lug nuts. All of them should be present and tight, none of them loose or missing. If it were loose on an aluminum rim, we would look for signs of oxidation or white powder. On a steel rim, we'd look for rust trails. Moving on to our oil hub and seal. The oil hub should be properly mounted and secured. All nuts and bolts should be present and tight, not missing or loose. It should not be leaking any 90-weight gear lube. If it were, that would be a sign of an outer axle seal leak. Moving on to our valve stem. Our valve stem should be properly mounted and secured. Should not be leaking any air, should not be bent, and should be secured at the end with a metal cap.